Looking for a reliable source for top news and stories from the National League Central? You've been recruited to open the files at Central Intelligence, the Slasher Sports Baseball podcast, presented on the Slasher Sports YouTube channel, as well as its Spotify podcast feed. I am Special Agent for National League Central Affairs, Steve Beck. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Slasher Sports and also my personal handle at Slasher Baseball. You can share your comments and show suggestions via email, slasherbaseball@yahoo.com. And be sure to join the Slasher Sports community on Discord so we can keep the conversations going. Throughout the week, we will release a new intelligence episode every Thursday. So go to slashersports.com to cover all of our college sports, cinema, and lifestyle offerings. It's not just baseball. We try to cover all of the bases. I want to give a shout out before we get started to Tom from Lima, Ohio. I really enjoyed our baseball conversations this past weekend at PNC Park. Even though he was a Reds fan, he was there to watch the Pirates and Brewers, as was I. And it's great. It's the best part of this gig is being able to go to games, interact with fans, especially out-of-town fans, and kind of get, their perspectives. There are about a dozen Brewer fans, too, that I talked to throughout the two games that I did attend. But Tom and I had a real nice connection. I really enjoyed it. And certainly if you ever run across me at a ball game, tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, let's talk some National League Central baseball. I'd love to do that. Now, we'll also be releasing our viewpoints about the MLB draft coming up here this coming Sunday. We'll talk about the comings and goings between now and the trade deadline. So you can find that on our Slasher Sports YouTube channel, which it might be just a really quick 1 minute blurb. It might be a couple of minutes. What really won't be podcast form, but we intend, to keep everybody up to date. And as things break, we're going to get on as quickly as we can to talk with you and get your feedback on trades, on DFAs, on your team's draft selections. It'll be interesting. The National League Central team has the number one pick in the draft. We'll talk about that in a little bit here in the Pittsburgh Pirates. But I don't want you to think it's just podcasts. There's so much that we offer here at Slasher Sports. So again, slashersports.com is your source. We've even got merchandise. You can get Slasher Sports shirts. We've kind of updated the design, but I kind of like this particular one. So I put it on here for this podcast, as we go forward. Let's do some background checks. Check on the week that was for all 5 National League Central teams. I don't want to go through every series. I think what we're going to try to do going forward is pick one game or one transaction or one injury, whatever it might be, for each of the teams and kind of talk about it. I mean, generally by the time you would get to a podcast, maybe you've already seen on various sources, videos, and you've been inundated with numerous sites repeating the same news story over and over and over again. So we want to take a different approach here at Central Intelligence. And yes, we're going to cover in detail. And if there's just a really, really big story that needs to be talked about, we're going to talk about it, but we don't want to just regurgitate the same old stuff from all of the standard sources. We really want to do a deeper dives, if you will, into the National League Central and the teams involved. I think we'll go alphabetically this week. We'll start with the Cubs. And the one game I want to talk about is their Friday night win, 10-1, drubbing. It's even more than a win. It was a drubbing over the Cleveland Guardians. Rookie Justin Steele nailed down an all-star berth, going 6 1/3, scattered 3 hits, didn't allow a run. It did take him 96 pitches to get that far, but the Guardians are the kind of team that wear down pitchers. They want to work the counts. They want starting pitchers and even relievers, to have to go maximum effort so that they can tire quickly. And maybe if let's say a starting pitcher, like in this case, Steele, is pitching really well, get him out of the ball game a little bit earlier, so you're not scrambling over the course of the last inning or two, you might have a couple of extra innings to actually get a chance to get to him. But what jumped out to me was how in the bottom of the third inning, the Cubs smelled blood and they put the game away. Cal Quantrill, good pitcher, good young pitcher. I think we have not seen the best of him yet in a Cleveland uniform. He labored, though, through the first 2 innings without allowing any runs. But then leading off, their half of the third, Yan Gomes just smoked the ball to second base. Then Jared Young and Nick Madrigal singled. Mike Tauchman drew a walk, so we had loaded bases. Then Nico Horner, as he has done throughout this season, came up with a big hit to center field, scoring 2. I'm not quite sure why Tauchman didn't advance, because I think Horner had a chance to stretch it out to be a double on this particular case. But again, they got 2 runs there. Quantrill did induce 2 pop outs. One foul pop to the catcher, one to another infielder. So he got out of it. But really, then at the bottom of the fourth, the Cubs just put their spikes to the Guardians' necks and stepped on them. Bellinger and Gomes hit hard singles and scored on a Young triple. Tauchman chased Quantrill with a single to center, scoring Young. And then after that, the Cubs were off and running. And when you watch that game, and I only watched part of it. I had to go back and watch the condensed version of the entire game. I did start watching that game before I switched to the end of the Brewers and Pirates game. It's obvious the Cubs players believe. They know they have what it takes to climb back in the division race. Again, they're under 500. As we record this, they had a good start, faltered a bit. They're kind of getting their equilibrium back. Marcus Stroman and Steele have been terrific as far as starting pitching goes. Their bullpen is getting better. I think the roles are more defined. Alzolay, I think he is going to have moments where he can't control his slider, perhaps the way that the Cubs would like to see him do that, but he's not afraid to go to it, even if he's behind in the count. 2-0, 3-0, he's still going to throw that slider. He wants hitters to beat his best pitch. So the takeaway from that particular game, and then really the rest of the series and how they've played against the Brewers, is that, the Cubs know that there's enough talent to hang in an NL Central division, that there is no runaway team in this particular division. It's not the Braves and the NL League. Basically every team except the Cardinals probably have at least some sliver of hope to get in the divisional race. I don't know whether that herd is going to be thinned out as we go deeper into the season, but certainly the Cubs believe in the players in that locker room. They've got some terrific veterans. They've got some young players. I'm sure there's some tough decisions here where the Cubs out of the All-Star break do not reel off a bunch of games, and some of the other teams in the divisions do. Perhaps then, maybe they're not going to be willing to trade away some of the talent that they've put together in their minor league system. But I would imagine they would need to pick up at least one arm. If they really want to go for it in the Central, they need to pick up, I think, at least one arm, ideally a starter, but starters are going to be costly. Everybody needs starters. So maybe it's a bullpen arm. Maybe they go to bullpen games in some cases, to kind of rest their pitchers. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Steele. How far they're going to let him pitch. Are they going to skip his turn? He's already had some arm soreness and shoulder soreness here during the season. So that'll be interesting to see what goes on there. Now, Cincinnati, meanwhile, kept running and slashing their way to wins. And I know I'd said that I wanted to focus on one game to sum up a week for each team, or one transaction, or whatever it would be. But you actually need to look at a pair of consecutive extra inning games against Baltimore on the road last Wednesday, and then the home series opener against the Padres to understand how for real the Cincinnati Reds are. It's an experienced young team. They seem to always rise to the occasion. They are not afraid of the moment. And these two, come from behind extra inning wins. Again, one on the road and then one to open a homestand. They didn't come against teams that are pretty much out of the playoff conversation. These are against acknowledged playoff contenders. And people have got to stop just saying, oh, well, it's the Reds. Oh, they had lost 100 games last year. No team's ever gone from 100 wins to win a division. Well, eventually it has to happen. And I think if you ask Reds fans and you interview the players in there, I mean, they've embraced this, we're America's team sort of approach to it. I think the Reds are the best story of 2023. And the players really are feeding off of the energy. The crowds are coming out. I mean, I haven't seen a crowd in Cincinnati below 30,000 over the last, 2 homestands there. There might have been one where there was a weather situation, but really overall, I mean, the fans are coming out. They're starting to believe. And if you do not yet believe in the Reds, I think you need to go back and, if you have MLB TV or MLB.com, watch some condensed games, go on YouTube, whatever source it is that you get your baseball video. And you need to watch this team. They have issues when it comes to pitching. I will grant you that. Their 2 best starters, Lodolo and Green, are out till August at best. Now, Andrew Abbott is still, he's only a couple starts in, and people are talking about him like, oh, well, he's going to be a perennial all-star already. I mean, he could very well be. He may be the best of the bunch as far as being a pitcher. I think Green throws harder, and I think he can be more dominant at times. But as far as being a consistent winning pitcher in this league, I think Andrew Abbott has by far the highest ceiling. And for those that might be worried about, oh, yeah, but he's a rookie and they're going to want to manage his innings, not so much. I mean, he pitched 4 years of college baseball. He didn't come out after his junior year. He pitched 4 years of college baseball at Virginia. He's not afraid to take the ball. He's used to pitching a lot of innings. He pitched a lot of wood bat summer leagues while he was in college. He's pitched significant amounts of innings in the minors coming up. So even though it was a very short stay in the minors for Abbott, I mean, he's used to a workload. So I don't think Nick Krall is going to be concerned about putting a cap on the innings he's pitched. So that's really a big, big advantage. But there's no doubt that the talent 1 through 9 in the lineup and the bullpen is good enough for the Reds to stay in contention all the way through to the end of September, beginning of October. There's no doubt about that. They're going to have to get an arm. And the good news, bad news for Reds fans is they do have the prospect depth. I mean, there are guys that haven't even come up yet, or have only come up for a real brief, cup of coffee in the majors, that are among the top 70 prospects, according to MLB.com. We haven't even seen them yet. Most of the young pitchers that are truly ready to make a contribution are up. So that means the bad news being that starting pitching is going to be very, very expensive in this market. The Reds are going to have to part with some players that perhaps they do not. Maybe they can package someone like Nick Senzel, who really, he's a former number 1 pick. He's kind of gotten past the injury bug, but ultimately, Senzel's not going to have a place to play, at least not regularly. You could add Senzel as a sweetener in some kind of deal, along with one of your top 30 prospects, to get a front end of the rotation pitcher. And the Reds they just flat out have to do it. That's not a knock on the organization. They've drafted well. They're developing well. They just don't have the young arms available or healthy. Williamson has had his moments. There's a lot of young pitchers that have had their moments, but really they're going to have to find some way to patchwork that rotation until Green and Lodolo come back. And even then, you got to figure they're going to be eased in. They're not going to be out there throwing 8-9 innings their first start off of the IL. Something else to note. 7 players on this Reds roster. Matt McLain, Spencer Steer, TJ Friedl, Fraley, Ellie De La Cruz, Will Benson, Jonathan India, all have OPS pluses above the league mean, above the league average, which is 100. And believe it or not, De La Cruz and India have the 2 lowest OPS pluses. Now, I'm not a huge analytics guy. I don't think you need to put a plus or an explanation on any statistic. I mean, OPS is just fine, but, all of these analytics are all the rage. Most baseball fans like to quote this stuff, and they want to turn to that and say, oh, look what's going on. If you're going to do that, then you need to acknowledge you can't use analytics to dismiss what the Reds are doing, because across the board, analytically, the Reds are for real. And I'm still amazed at how many so-called experts are still hesitant to say the Reds are in it for the rest of the year. It's a story that I think is going to get a lot of run in the offseason. How the Reds turn things around so quickly after a couple of missteps under the regime of Dick Williams, where they tried to sort of go for it while they were accumulating pitchers. But I mean, Nick Krall and his team, his front office team, has done a great job putting this team together. So just keep that in mind. And we've got some players here that are significantly above the average. Matt McLain has the highest OPS plus on the Reds at 137. He hasn't even been up here all year. He's at 137. Spencer Steer, who in my eyes, should be an all-star. I'm not quite sure how he got overlooked. Maybe his versatility works against him when you were putting together, a team here. But I thought he should have been an all-star. He's an OPS plus at 132. So that is significantly above, the league average. So the Reds, whether you like it or not, NL Central fans, if you're not a Reds fan and it really bothers you, okay, I'm not saying they're the big red machine right away, but there's still a lot of talent coming. So the Reds don't have to necessarily spend in free agency. They can use that prospect capital to make themselves even better, not only for this stretch run, but going forward. But I thought that those 2 games against contenders in extra innings showed and should have cemented the Reds as an absolute for real NL playoff contender. And the way things are going, maybe 2 teams from the Central will sneak into the playoffs. I've come out, as most people have, but I came out on this podcast and said, the NL Central, for all intents and purposes, is a 1-team playoff division. Maybe not. And one of the reasons I say that is the Milwaukee Brewers. I mean, I've contended in the offseason, through spring training, through every episode of this podcast, I have come out and said, I think the Brewers are the team to beat in this division. I never was a believer in what the Cardinals were going to be able to do. A lot of people were saying they're going to run away with a weak division. That certainly hasn't played out that way. But, I mean, I still think that the Brewers are the favorite to win the NL Central. And, I attended the Saturday and Sunday games at PNC Park, as I alluded to earlier. And please note my Pirates Hawaiian luau shirt giveaway that they have. That's one of those promotions that across the league I just love. I mean, I'm an old guy, so maybe it's an old guy dad kind of, giveaway. I mean, it's not a bobblehead. It's not, something cool, whatever T-shirt they're giving away on any given week. But I really like league-wise when they're going with these Hawaiian themed kind of apparel as giveaways. And while Friday and Saturday provided the most thrills, I think Sunday's win on Chris Ray was by far the most satisfying. And I think it calmed a lot of nerves among the Brewers fan base, at least those that I came across at PNC Park this past weekend. You know, they got walked off Friday night after blowing a lead. And really, they were saved by a rain delay from blowing another lead. They were up 10-0 after their at-bats in the sixth inning, and they hung on to win 11-8. But when those two things happened, the Brewers needed to win on Sunday and win the series against the Pirates. Had they been swept, or had they lost 2 of 3 and coughed up the leads and all, I think Brewers fans would have gotten very nervous about their ability to hang on to leads. I will concede that the bullpen maybe has been overworked, but I mean, you know, Corbin Burns has not had his best year, but he's still Corbin Burns. You know? And it'll be interesting to see. They just had Rowdy Tellez go on the IL. While he has not been hitting has not been homering up for a lot of power, he has come up with some big hits, you know, for the Brewers. So, you know, that's another thing, another hurdle they have to overcome. But every team in the division and just about every team in Major League Baseball is dealing with serious injury concerns. So, fueled by that win on Sunday, I think it allowed the Brewers themselves to even shake off kind of that, oh no, here it comes again. Because sometimes, you know, when things happen, especially in a short period of time or within a given series or with a given week, if history is repeating itself, I think even the players and the coaching staff starts to press a little bit or worry a little bit. Now all Craig Counsell has to do is find some magic against the Reds this weekend, and then ride that magic carpet through the All-Star break and integrate American Ballpark for the opening series of the second half of the season, again against Cincinnati. I mean, the Brewers have the opportunity to knock some of the wind in the Reds' sails. I don't know that they are. I don't think either team is going to sweep either of the series, whether it be at home or away. But I think the Brewers have certainly played better. They seem a lot more relaxed. I don't want to say they're not focused, but they seem to be more at ease in the series with the Cubs that's going on as we record this podcast. It'll be interesting. I mean, if Craig Counsell's in the dugout, I do not worry about a team very much, but it'll be interesting. I think this upcoming weekend series, you know, at home against the Reds, and then after the All-Star break in Cincinnati, that's going to tell us a lot about what to expect. If they split them evenly, that means coming into the home stretch, neck and neck. There'll probably be a winner by a nose. But if they can keep themselves in it, even if the Brewers would not win the division and the Reds would, or the Cubs, whoever it might be, then I think the Brewers still can be playing well enough to secure a wild card spot. So we'll have to see. And we talked about the series at PNC Park in Pittsburgh, the Brewers and the Pirates. And as I watched, I live in Pittsburgh, so I get the opportunity to watch the Pirates on a nightly basis. I mean, I do have an MLB TV subscription. I do have a Peacock subscription. My Apple one lapsed. But, you know, I have a chance to watch just about every game if I want to. But as I was sitting there in the stands and talking to not only Pirate fans, but fans of the Reds and fans of the Brewers that happened to be in attendance at the game, I kept wondering if Ben Cherington has made his mind up yet. I don't mean who the team will select with the first pick of the MLB draft this Sunday. And despite all the hype, I don't think it's going to be either of the consensus LSU stars, Skeens. Everybody wants to say, this is the guy. I don't know. I don't know that they need to take an outfielder per se. I think Ben Cherington and his staff picks Chase Dollander of Tennessee, and it's going to shake things up, I think, for a lot of it. What it does is it allows them strategically to spread their bonus pool money out a little bit more evenly down throughout the later rounds of the draft. So if they want to go for a player that seems 100% committed to go play college baseball, or a college prospect that is really on the fence about signing and not returning to college for whatever reason, Chase Dollander, he just screams Ben Cherington pitching prospect. And it's easy to get caught up in the hype of a draft, especially coming out of a College World Series. That's not to say that Skeens and Cruz or any of the other top college players aren't terrific players. In my opinion, Chase Dollander is most MLB-ready pitcher in this draft. Did he have an inconsistent subpar 2023? Yes, he did. But you can't forget that, okay, this guy's 21, and he was the SEC Player of the Year in 2022. And the SEC, even if you don't want to admit it, is probably the dominant conference in baseball. We know it is in football in so many ways, but in baseball, I think they have established themselves that way. I think Dollander is most major league ready. And I think Cherington is going to surprise people, but once he does that, I think it sets up a draft strategy where they can take a couple other flyers on some players that other teams may just feel are unsignable. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, if they get, especially if they get Skeens, I think that bodes very well for the Pirates' immediate hopes to contend. Not 2023, because I think he needs to get some time, get his feet wet in pro ball before he comes up to the majors. But we'll see what happens, see if I'm right or wrong. Yeah, again, and certainly if you're watching this podcast, you can either comment on our YouTube channel if you're actually watching, the video as well as the audio, or you can send us, a tweet at @SlasherBaseball, send us an email, slasherbaseball@yahoo.com, or join the conversation over our new Discord community. We really do love the input. There's been some great conversations started already by you out there, not by us, by you. So we're really, really looking forward to it. But I wonder if the Pirates GM, getting away from the draft here for a second, has decided to move veteran placeholders like Rich Hill or Carlos Santana sooner rather than later. In the topsy-turvy world of the NL Central, especially here in 2023, Pittsburgh still has a puncher's chance in the division. The negative run differential of -38, I think, really clouds that vision that some Pirate fans might have of the Pirates being able to extend all the way through. They have started to, with Henry Davis and Nick Gonzalez, they have started to piecemeal bringing up some of their top major league ready prospects already. I know they would like to bring, let's say, a Quinn Priester or some other players up in order to be able to see what they've got, see what they might need to add either through the trade market now or in the offseason to kind of balance out, the rawness but the great talent that their prospects have with players that can fill significant roles for a team that I do believe is going to be a playoff contender. At the very least, I think the Pirates are going to be a wild card team in 2024. They were that close. But Cherington's dilemma is really burned into so many Pirate fans' mind. What has happened during the Neil Huntington regime after the playoff teams of 13, 14, and 15? The ownership certainly has been frugal, if you want to be polite, but they have had an eye toward the bottom line. Of all the teams that the MLBPA had filed grievances against going into the last CBA negotiations, the Pirates were the only team that the MLBPA had not withdrawn. But I think that Cherington and his team have shown they're not afraid to make moves. I think they are going to spend. I mean, they took on, not big contracts. Santana, Rich Hill are relatively affordable. Andrew McCutchen was affordable. Choi, who'll be coming back probably after the All-Star break, pretty soon after the All-Star break. He's around $4 or $5 million. So they did bring in some contract to kind of be placeholders. But I wonder if Cherington now has made up his mind and said, hey, it's time. We'll take this, the arrows here for a little while. Okay. But you have to remember when you're a fan of a team like the Pirates, and I think you can apply this to the Reds last year, as dreadful of a season as both teams had last year. But I think the Reds had their moments. The Pirates are going to have moments like they just did on the 4th of July, coming from behind multiple times to beat the Dodgers. But there's going to be soul-searching moments too. When their young pitchers struggle to learn, how to get major league hitters out, how not to tip your pitch patterns, not necessarily your pitchers, but the patterns that you adopt when you're going through a game. Once you get through the lineup one time, if you're repeating those same patterns to the same hitters, then that obviously is going to leave you exposed. I compare this 2023 Pirates team to the 1988 Buccos. There were some big moments. There was a near no-hitter against the Mets by Zane Smith that could have derailed, the Mets divisional things. And I think it exposed the Mets in 1988 as not being a World Series caliber team. You had Barry Bonds, you had Andy Van Slyke, you had Doug Drabek, having eye-catching games. They weren't maybe necessarily at star level yet. You had players like R.J. Reynolds and these other young players coming in trying to make a name for themselves, in the organization. Jay Bell. You have the makings. I'll even compare them to the Braves of like 1989, 1990. The talent was there. They just needed to learn on the job, and that's what's happening in Pittsburgh. So it'll be interesting to see what Barrington does decide if he hasn't made up his mind already. Now, for the Cardinals, I think the first game of that day-night doubleheader against the Yankees to start off the month of July was an example of what the majority of MLB fans expected this team to be. And I also want to touch on the St. Louis Cardinals fan. As dreadful a season as this team has had, and as frustrating as some of the managerial decisions and roster management decisions have been for them, and despite severe storm warnings that were posted the night before and then early in the morning, so fans knew, okay, it's going to rain and it's going to rain hard. We're going to have hail. We're going to have some serious storms. 44,237 Cardinal fans showed up at Busch Stadium the 3rd. And they sat through, most of them, a very extensive rain delay. And how long was the rain delay? Okay. When I got to my seat for the Brewers Pirates game at 4 o'clock, that game had started at 1 o'clock Central Time. The game was in a rain delay. Cardinals were up 11-1. It was in a rain delay. By the time the tarp came off after the second rain delay during the Pirate Brewer game, they had 2 45-minute weather delays. The first weather delay happened and the sun was shining, and I don't really know why they did it. That's for another podcast, I guess, how they decide whether games need to be suspended or whatever it would be. But as they were taking the tarp off, the Cardinals and Yankees had just then gotten back to those stands were pretty full. And another 44,000 came for the nightcap, the scheduled game at 7:05 Central Time. They came back. They either came back or a new group of fans came in for that game. Whether you're a fan or a foe of the Cardinals, you cannot deny that the Cardinals fan base is the best in Major League Baseball, period. The most knowledgeable, the most loyal. It's very much a regional fan base, and that goes back generations. And the radio network, I think the Cardinals radio network is probably one of those few radio networks that are as valuable as their television network. It's just the nature, a lot of their fans are rural, not exclusively, but really it's a multi-state regional type of fan base. And they're a joy to talk baseball with. I need to get back. I haven't been to St. Louis for a while. I need to get back to, because it's always I learn something every time I go to a Cardinal. I like to think I don't know everything about baseball. I like to think I'm pretty knowledgeable about things, but historical slants, just the way that you look at player evaluation, I always learn something when I'm around Cardinal. In that game, the Cardinals eventually won 11-4, but before the rain delay, Jack Flaherty saw 6 scoreless innings. For the first time this year that I can recall, he threw a significant amount more strikes than he did balls. He's been sort of in that 55-45 range for most of his starts. Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman crushed 2 homers off Luis Severino. Arenado and Edman had big hits in key moments. They made a statement against the Yankees that the team's fans had to love to see. They are not giving up yet. They feel they can compete with any team in Major League Baseball. Now, maybe that's naive of them. And we're going to talk a lot about that going into the trade deadline on future episodes. But they also beat Garrett Cole. They won the series that way. So, for the Cardinal fans, that Saturday, that particular game where they thumped the Yankees, I think that really helped extend a life preserver for those fans that don't want to go under on this 2023. Having said that, let's focus now on some clues about the Cardinals that I think deserve investigating. Is it fact or fiction, in your mind, that the St. Louis Cardinals compromised their chance for immediate success and a near future success by allowing Skip Schumacher to leave town, a town he loves, organization he was drafted by and played 8 seasons for, allowed him to go to Miami, where he has made the Marlins a playoff contender in just 3 months at the helm. Skip Schumacher is a walking, talking, successful example of what used to be the Cardinals' way. And I say what used to be. I'm seeing that just like the Roman Empire declined and then the Yankee teams of the 50s and 60s declined. That Cardinals way is losing its luster. Schumacher was drafted in the 5th round by St. Louis, spent 4 years in the system, made his major league debut in 2005. By 2008, he was a 500 at bat cog in some very, very good Cardinal teams. And by all accounts, Albert Pujols has said it, Mark DeRosa has said it. So many people that played with Skip Schumacher have said he was the ideal teammate. He's everything that you wanted. He drew rave reviews after he had retired as a first base coach and fielding instructor, and then an associate manager in San Diego. He returned to the Cardinals, the organization that he grew up in, and was named the bench coach for the 2021 season. Mike Schilt praised Skip Schumacher. Players on the roster talked about the difference that he made. So when John Mozeliak made the still puzzling decision to fire Mike Schultz, because basically he was not going to just do exactly what the reports coming from the front office saying he had. I thought Mike Schultz, got the shaft there, and I thought he did a great job during his relatively brief time managing the Cardinals. Schumacher was already in place in the Cardinals organization to replace Schultz. And so for me, it's a no-brainer situation. But no, the choice was Oliver Marmol. Oliver Marmol is a good baseball mind. He's a good mind. I think he's better serving in the minors. He did a great job, with short season teams in the organization as he came up before he joined the staff. I'm not knocking his baseball knowledge, but there's knowledge and there's applied knowledge. And I think it has been obvious from the very beginning of Marmol's helmship in the Cardinals dugout that he is a bit overwhelmed in game. I think he's a bit overwhelmed. I think he has done a poor job managing the pitching staff. And I don't understand really whether it's stubbornness on the part of the front office that they want to admit so soon that they made a mistake. But, Marmol is as much a part of the problem in St. Louis this year as players not performing up to where they need to play. They've got a core. The Cardinals love to market and sell their stars. So that's why Adam Wainwright was given such a long leash before they put him mercifully on the IL. I think that, that's why Contreras has been given a long lead. And people say, well, what do you mean? They tried to, they benched him and they didn't let him catch. Considering what they paid for him, he's been given every opportunity to try to redeem himself this year, and he hasn't quite pulled himself out of the rut yet. But you got Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Tommy Edman, Jack Flaherty. I'm sure every time Mozeliak picks up the phone, someone's asking about Jack Flaherty. Do they still believe in Jack Flaherty? Cardinals love to have that star power around them. But if you don't have a front office that is being consistent in its decision-making, and you don't have a manager in the dugout capable of making decisions. Now, I'll give Marmol credit. He doesn't, at least he hadn't in the past up until, certain points this year. He doesn't throw his players under the bus per se. He does kind of say, look, this is what he explains in detail why he did it. But I don't know that he ever takes responsibility for whatever decisions are going on there. I mean, fundamentally, the Cardinals are a disaster, and they have always been one of the better defensive teams in Major League Baseball, not just the National League or the NL Central. It's been a bad thing. So you have to wonder. You look at where the Marlins already have 50 wins as we record this. And based on the early innings, after blowing the Cardinals out 15-2 on the 4th of July, they were up 4-0 before you even blinked an eye on the following game. You have to wonder, if you're a Cardinal fan, why isn't it Skip Schumacher in the Cardinals dugout? Why is it Oliver Marmol? And you have to wonder. I think everybody acknowledges the Cardinals are going to punt at the deadline. They're not going to go through a rebuild. I mean, they're going to definitely have to retool. Reimagine is the word I always heard from Ben Cherington here in Pittsburgh. But they're going to have to retool. They're going to have to step back this year, figure out what they want to do, how they want to proceed. But you have to wonder, had they made the decision of Scott Schumacher taking over from Mike Schultz, would this team be performing much differently? Certainly, Schumacher has worked wonders with young players, especially pitchers. And the Marlins may have the best pitching in the National League. Hard to believe. Maybe not bullpen-wise, but certainly their starting pitching, I would say 1 through 5 is the best in the National. But he's even gotten the best out of players like Jorge Soler. He is a much more consistent player than he ever was. And there's a bunch of little Skip Schumachers, on that roster. Wendell and Luis Arias, guys, John Birdie, guys that just play the game right. They're not worried about launch angles and all these fancy stats. They just play the game right. They get runners from second to third to home. They do whatever it takes to score runs to support their fantastic pitching. You have to wonder, if you're a Cardinal fan, if Skip Schumacher would have been the better choice to take over from Mike Schill. Hard to say. Well, we're out of time for this week. Again, please do make it a point of checking out the Slasher Sports community on Discord. There's just amazing conversations going on even as we record this. The base is growing. We really look forward to bringing you into the conversations. Central Intelligence new episodes will drop every Thursday. We have an American League podcast also coming to Slasher Baseball. That will probably launch. We'll probably drop our first episode this weekend. It's going to be an entire league, but really we're going to call it AL and 30. Very small little snippets about all the teams in the AL. Didn't want to do a division because I love the NL Central. It's the most fascinating, enjoying division in baseball, despite what all the talking heads on TV say. This is the most enjoyable, fascinating division in Major League Baseball. We appreciate you taking time here to listen and watch the Central Intelligence. I am your host, Steve Beck. We'll be back to you with another episode next week. We'll certainly talk about the draft. We'll have to start talking about what's in store for the second half. And let's hope that your team does something next week that gets us talking about it on Central Intelligence. Thanks for watching. For more great content and to stay up to date with Central Intelligence and the OK Baseball podcast, click subscribe now. Put away the files, lock up the safe. We will see you here next time.